They say the most dangerous person in the room is the one no one notices. For 3 years at the Gilded Rose, I was part of the furniture, a shadow in a crisp white apron, pouring vintage Bordeaux for men who didn't know my name and women who looked through me like glass. I was drowning, suffocating under my brother's medical school tuition and a mountain of debt that whispered my failure every night. But tonight the world changed. Jennifer Kelly, the city's most ruthless socialite, tripped me for sport, laughing as wine ruined her silk dress. She expected a scene. She expected me to beg. Instead, I looked at the confidential merger documents scattered on her table. In 10 seconds, my waitress brain solved the puzzle her billionaire fiancé Gabriel Reed couldn't see. I didn't slap her. I leaned in and whispered the truth. She was embezzling millions from his tech empire. The silence that followed didn't just break the room, it shattered my life. And Gabriel Reed? He didn't fire me. He looked at me like I was the only person in the world who was truly awake. The rain lashed against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Manhattan's most exclusive dining room. But inside, the air was thick with the scent of white truffles and cold ambition. My feet throbbed, a dull, rhythmic ache that had become my constant companion. I adjusted the tray, my fingers trembling slightly. Not from the weight, but from the text message burning a hole in my pocket. "Sis," the registrar called. "If the remaining $12,000 for the semester isn't paid by Friday, they're pulling my enrollment." "I'm sorry. I know how hard you're working." I swallowed the lump in my throat. My brother Leo was the only thing I had left. He was brilliant, kind, and so close to becoming the doctor our mother never lived to see. I was the bridge between his dreams and the gutter, and that bridge was cracking. "Table 4. Ava, move it. The champagne won't pour itself," the floor manager hissed, his eyes darting toward the VIP booth. I straightened my spine, smoothed my apron, and stepped into the light. At table 4 sat the pinnacle of New York power. Gabriel Reed, the iron architect of Wall Street. He was younger than the legends suggested, with dark, watchful eyes and a presence that seemed to pull the oxygen out of the room. He didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a predator who had mastered the art of wearing a suit. Beside him sat Jennifer Kelly, a woman whose beauty was as sharp and cold as a diamond-tipped blade dot as I approached to refill their crystal flutes. Jennifer was mid-laugh, her hand resting dismissively on a stack of blue-bound legal folders. She didn't even pause her sentence as I leaned in. Then it happened. As I moved to retreat, her silver stiletto shot out. It was deliberate, calculated, cruel. I stumbled, the tray tilting. A glass of crystal shattered, a golden arc of liquid splashing directly onto Jennifer's cream-colored Chanel gown. The dining room went deathly silent. "You clumsy, pathetic little girl!" Jennifer shrieked, standing up so quickly her chair screeched against the marble. "Do you have any idea what this dress costs? It's worth more than your life." I dropped to my knees, instinctively reaching for the spilled glass. I'm so sorry, ma'am." "Don't touch me!" She sneered, looking around the room to ensure everyone was watching her performance. She leaned down, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "You're nothing. You're a bug I could crush with one phone call. Look at you. Desperate, poor, and utterly invisible." I felt the heat rise in my chest. For years I had taken the insults. I had taken the invisible treatment. But as I looked down, my eyes landed on the documents she had carelessly pushed aside in her rage. My mind had always been a curse. An analytical engine that saw patterns where others saw chaos. I didn't just see numbers. I saw stories. I saw the Reed Global logo on the header. I saw the shell company names. I saw the Project Icarus. Dividends being diverted to an offshore account in the Caymans, an account registered under Jennifer's maiden name. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. I stood up. I didn't shake. I didn't apologize again. "The dress is silk file, Miss Kelly," I said, my voice projecting clearly through the hushed restaurant. "At current retail, it's approximately $8,000. A steep price, certainly. But it pales in comparison to the $4.7 million you've moved out of the Icarus Transition Fund over the last 6 months." Jennifer froze. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking like a wax statue. "Gabriel Reed," who had remained as still as a statue throughout the scene, slowly turned his head. His gaze, heavy and terrifyingly intelligent, locked onto mine. "What did you just say?" "Check the third addendum on page 42 of your merger agreement, Mr. Reed," I said, stepping closer to the table, ignoring the manager screaming my name in the background. "The operating expenses for the digital infrastructure aren't going to contractors. They're being looped through a vanity charity called the Kelly Foundation, and from there they vanish. Your fiancée isn't just clumsy with her feet. She's very efficient with your ledgers." Gabriel didn't look at the papers. He looked at me. It was the first time in my life a man like him had actually seen me. Not as a servant, not as a function, but as a threat. "Gabriel, she's insane," Jennifer gasped, her voice cracking. "She's a waitress. She's trying to deflect because she ruined my quiet," Gabriel said. It wasn't a shout. It was a command that felt like a physical weight. He reached out, picked up the folder, and flipped to page 40-2. The silence lasted an eternity. The only sound was the ticking of the grandfather clock in the foyer and the frantic beating of my own heart. I had just committed professional suicide. I was going to be fired, blacklisted, maybe even sued. But as I watched Gabriel's eyes scan the page, I felt a strange sense of peace. For once I wasn't invisible. Gabriel closed the folder. He didn't look at Jennifer. He didn't even look angry. He looked impressed. "Jennifer," he said softly, "go home. My driver will take you. Don't call me. My lawyers will be in touch by dawn." "Gabriel, you can't believe this. This servant," I said. Gabriel's voice darkened, a hint of the predator beneath the silk. "Go now." Jennifer scrambled for her purse, her heels clicking frantically as she fled the room in a cloud of ruined silk and shattered dignity. The manager rushed forward, babbling apologies, reaching for my arm to drag me away. "Get your hands off her," Gabriel snapped. The manager jumped back as if burned. Gabriel stood up, smoothing the front of his bespoke tuxedo. He walked around the table until he was standing directly in front of me. He was much taller than I realized. He smelled of sandalwood and old money. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ava Lowe," I whispered. "Ava Lowe," he repeated, as if testing the weight of the syllables. "Tell me, Ava, how did you see a forensic accounting trail in the time it took for a glass of champagne to hit the floor?" "I've spent 3 years watching people like you, Mr. Reed," I said, meeting his eyes. "You'd be surprised what you notice when everyone assumes you're too stupid to understand what they're saying." A small, dangerous smile touched his lips. "You're drowning, aren't you? I saw your hands shake when you saw the bill for the dress." "I have obligations." "I don't care about your obligations," he said, leaning in. "But I do care about talent. I am surrounded by the best analysts in the world, and none of them caught what a waitress found while clearing a table. I have a building full of vipers, Ava. I need a pair of eyes that can see through the tall grass." He pulled a heavy matte black card from his pocket and pressed it into my hand. "You're not a waitress anymore. You're my human lie detector. Report to my office at 8 a.m. tomorrow. Don't be late. We have a lot of people to destroy." He turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving the entire world behind him. I stood there, clutching the black card, my heart racing. I looked down at my stained apron. I was still Ava Lowe. I still had $12,000 to find. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving. I was a player in the game. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. With those who believe that destiny can change everything one day. Subscribe, because when destiny shifts, everything changes. Standing in the lobby of Reed Global felt like standing at the gates of a digital Olympus. The walls were sheer sheets of obsidian and glass, and the air held the sterile, pressurized hum of billion-dollar servers and cold ambition. I looked down at my reflection in the polished floor. Gabriel had sent a car for me at dawn, along with a garment bag containing a tailored charcoal blazer and trousers that fit like a second skin. Gone was the starched white apron and the smell of industrial floor cleaner. I felt like an imposter in a high-tech suit of armor. "Miss Lowe?" "Mr. Reed is expecting you." A young man with a headset and a face devoid of emotion led me toward a private elevator. As the door slid shut, the silence was absolute. I watched the floor numbers climb toward the clouds. My stomach twisted. I wasn't just here to work. I was here to be a weapon. Gabriel had made it clear. His empire was a fortress, but the gates had been left open by the people he trusted most. The elevator opened directly into Gabriel's office. It was a cavernous space overlooking the skyline, filled with rare books and glowing monitors. Gabriel was standing by the window, his back to me. He didn't turn when I entered. "My board of directors believes I've lost my mind," he said, his voice echoing slightly. "They spent the morning hearing rumors about a waitress who humiliated the daughter of a Supreme Court justice. They think I'm making a sentimental mistake. Are you?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. He turned then, a glass of dark espresso in his hand. "I don't make mistakes, Ava. I make investments. And today, you're going to prove your valuation." He led me to a high-tech conference room where 12 people were already seated. These were the titans of his world, the heads of legal, finance, security, and logistics. They looked at me with a mixture of contempt and curiosity. To them, I was a curiosity, a temporary whim of a bored billionaire. "Everyone, this is Ava Lowe," Gabriel announced, taking his seat at the head of the table. "She is my new strategic analyst. She will be sitting in on all high-level briefings. Treat her as my third eye." The meeting was a whirlwind of corporate jargon and predatory maneuvers. They discussed hostile takeovers, liquidity events, and risk mitigation. But while they spoke, I did what I had done for years at the restaurant. I watched. I watched the way Marcus, the head of acquisitions, tapped his pen against his wedding ring whenever the topic of the new tech patent came up. I noticed how Sarah, the lead counsel, wouldn't meet Gabriel's eyes when she mentioned the pending SEC filing. 2 hours in, Gabriel leaned back. "The merger with Synapse Tech is stalling. We've had a data leak. Someone is feeding our valuation models to the competition." "Suggestions?" Marcus cleared his throat. "It has to be an external hack, Gabriel. Our internal security is airtight. I've run the logs myself." I looked at Marcus. He was sweating, just a thin sheen on his upper lip, nearly invisible under the fluorescent lights. I remembered a table of hedge fund managers from 2 years ago. One of them had the same nervous tick right before his credit card was declined for a $10,000 bottle of wine. "It wasn't a hack," I said. The room went silent. 12 pairs of eyes turned toward me, cold and predatory. "And what makes you say that, sweetheart?" Marcus sneered, the sweetheart dripping with condescension. "Because you didn't run the logs," I said, leaning forward. "You've mentioned 3 times that the external IP addresses were masked via a VPN in Singapore. But if you'd actually checked the raw data, you'd know our Singapore servers have been down for maintenance since Sunday." You're reciting a script, Marcus. And you're tapping your ring in the rhythm of someone who's lying to his boss. Gabriel's eyes narrowed. "Marcus? She's lying! She's a waitress trying to play detective." Marcus shouted, standing up. "Check his private cloud drive," I said to Gabriel. "He's been uploading the valuation models during his lunch breaks. He's not a hacker. He's just a man with a gambling debt and a very expensive mistress." Gabriel didn't need to hear more. He signaled to the security team waiting outside. As Marcus was dragged out, screaming threats, the rest of the board looked at me with a new emotion: fear. I wasn't an imposter anymore. I was the person who could see their secrets. After the room cleared, Gabriel walked over to me. He didn't say thank you. Instead, he reached into his desk and pulled out a check. $12,000. For your brother's tuition. I stared at the paper. "I haven't earned this yet. You saved me $40 million in intellectual property in the last 10 minutes, Gabriel said, his voice softening for the first time. "Consider it a signing bonus. Go pay the registrar, Ava, then come back. The real fight is just beginning." For the next few weeks, the world felt like a blur of luxury and high-stakes tension. Gabriel and I became an inseparable team. We spent late nights in his office eating takeout over piles of digital evidence. He told me about his father, the man who built the empire and was destroyed by a legal conspiracy he never saw coming. I told him about my mother who worked 3 jobs until her heart gave out, and my brother who was the only reason I kept breathing. There was an intimacy in our shared mission. A midnight conversation over coffee, a hand lingering on my shoulder as we looked at a screen. The lines between employer and employee were beginning to blur into something deeper. Something sincere. Gabriel Reed, the man the world called the Iron Architect, was human with me. He was lonely. He was tired of being surrounded by people who only loved his bank account. But the ghost of Jennifer Kelly was not gone. She was a wounded animal, and wounded animals are the most dangerous. One evening, as I was leaving the office, a group of federal agents stepped out of the shadows. Ava Lowe? Yes? You're under arrest for corporate espionage and the theft of proprietary encryption keys from Reed Global. My heart stopped. What? That's impossible. I work for Gabriel Reed. We have the evidence, the lead agent said, holding up a tablet. A digital trail showing you transmitted classified codes to a rival firm in Beijing. The logs were traced directly to your personal laptop. I looked at the screen. It was a perfect frame-up. The timestamps matched the hours I had been alone in my new apartment, the apartment Gabriel had provided. This is a mistake, I whispered as the cold steel of handcuffs snapped around my wrists. As they led me away, a black car pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down, revealing Jennifer Kelly. She wasn't screaming anymore. She was smiling, a slow, terrifying grin of triumph. Beside her sat her father, Judge Kelly, his face a mask of judicial stone. I told you, you were a bug, Ava, Jennifer whispered as the car sped away. And in this city, my father is the one who decides who gets crushed. I was thrown into a holding cell, the cold concrete a brutal reminder of the world I thought I had escaped. For 10 hours I sat in the dark. No phone call. No lawyer. Just the silence of a girl who had flown too close to the sun. But then, the heavy iron door creaked open. Gabriel Reed stood there, his coat damp from the rain, his expression a storm of controlled fury. He didn't look like a businessman. He looked like a man ready to burn the city down to find what was his. They won't let you out, I whispered, my voice breaking. Jennifer, her father, they've trapped me. Gabriel walked to the bars, his hand gripping the cold steel. They didn't trap you, Ava. They declared war on me. They think because they have a judge and a digital frame-up, they can take you away. The evidence looks real, Gabriel. They planted it on my laptop. I know, Gabriel said, his voice a low, vibrating growl. But they forgot one thing. I don't play by their rules. I built the systems they're trying to use against you. They wanted a digital war? I'm going to give them a digital apocalypse. He reached through the bars, his fingers brushing my cheek. Don't be afraid. I'm going to get you out of here, and then we're going to take everything they love. Starting with their reputation. In that moment, looking into his eyes, I realized I wasn't just his human lie detector. I was the heart he had forgotten he had. And Gabriel Reed was no longer just a billionaire. He was my protector. The walls of the holding cell felt like they were closing in, but Gabriel's promise stayed the air in my lungs. He didn't just get me out. He dismantled the arrest. Within 4 hours, a team of high-priced lawyers and digital forensics experts, men who looked like they lived in the shadows of the dark web, descended on the precinct. They didn't just prove the files on my laptop were remote injected. They traced the signal back to a server owned by a shell company linked to Judge Kelly's re-election campaign. By dawn, I was back at the estate, wrapped in a cashmere blanket, watching the sun rise over the Hudson. Gabriel hadn't slept. He sat across from me, his laptop open, his face illuminated by the blue light of a dozen scrolling windows. They're desperate, Ava, he said, his voice gravelly from exhaustion. The Kellys aren't just trying to hurt you. They're trying to trigger a morality clause in my board's contract. If I'm associated with a corporate spy, the board can force me out. This was a decapitation strike. And the charity gala tomorrow night? I asked. Jennifer is still hosting it. It's the perfect stage for their finale, Gabriel replied, finally closing his laptop and looking at me. They've planned a digital ambush. My sources tell me they're going to leak a doctored audio file during the keynote speech, one that makes it sound like I orchestrated the entire espionage plot using you as my pawn. It will go viral in seconds. Before I can even defend myself, the SEC will freeze my assets, and the board will vote me out. I stood up, the blanket falling to the floor. My fear was gone, replaced by the same cold, analytical fire that had saved me at the restaurant. Then we don't just defend. We intercept. The Blackthorn Charity Gala was a sea of shimmering silk, clinking crystal, and whispered betrayals. It was held at the Metropolitan Hall, a cavernous space of gold leaf and marble that felt more like a courtroom than a ballroom tonight. I wasn't there as a waitress, and I wasn't there as Gabriel's guest. I was a ghost. Gabriel arrived alone, looking every bit the untouchable titan in a black-on-black tuxedo. He was the bait. While the cameras flashed and Jennifer Kelly hovered near him like a vulture in a white gown, I moved through the service corridors. I wore a headset disguised as jewelry and a server's uniform I had borrowed from the catering staff. To everyone else, I was just a girl with a tray of hors d'oeuvres. To Gabriel, I was the only person who could stop the clock. "Ava, do you have eyes on the server room?" Gabriel's voice whispered in my ear, masked by the ambient noise of the party. "Almost there," I whispered back, ducking into a service elevator. "I see Judge Kelly's security detail near the AV booth. They're not watching the guests. They're watching the master laptop." "You have 6 minutes before Jennifer takes the stage for the opening toast," Gabriel warned. "The moment she taps that microphone, the script will run. If that file hits the airwaves, we lose everything." I reached the technical mezzanine, my heart hammering against my ribs. I saw the man, a high-end digital mercenary Jennifer had hired. He was leaned over the console, a flash drive glowing red in the dark. I didn't have a weapon. I didn't have a team. But I had 3 years of experience being ignored. I walked straight up to him, balancing a tray of champagne. "Excuse me, sir. Mr. Reed sent these up. He said the technical crew looks like they're working harder than the guests." The man looked up, his eyes hard and suspicious. He looked at the tray, then at my face, but I had lowered my head, the shadows of the mezzanine obscuring my features. I was just a function. A hand that served wine. "Leave it and get out," he grunted. As I leaned in to set the glass down, I saw his phone on the table. It was logged into the gala's internal network. I didn't grab the phone, I tripped. It was a perfect echo of the restaurant. The champagne spilled, not on him, but directly into the open cooling vents of the master server console. "You idiot!" he hissed, jumping back as the equipment began to hiss and spark. In the chaos of him trying to wipe down the electronics, I reached out. Not for a glass, but for his flash drive. My fingers, nimble from years of handling delicate crystal, snatched the drive and replaced it with a dummy I had prepared. Then, using a small handheld jammer Gabriel's team had built, I fried the Bluetooth bridge to the auditorium speakers. "I'm so sorry. Let me get some towels. Get out, now," he roared. I fled down the stairs, the real flash drive tucked into my palm. "Gabriel," I breathed into the mic as I burst into the main ballroom. "The drive is secure. But they have a backup plan." I saw Judge Kelly talking to the check commissioner near the East Bar. "They're going to serve you with a cease and desist the moment the speech fails. They want to lead you out in handcuffs, regardless of the audio." "I see them," Gabriel replied. I looked across the room. Gabriel was standing near the stage, Jennifer standing triumphantly beside him, the microphone in her hand. She looked out at the crowd of the city's elite, her eyes searching for the waitress she thought she had destroyed. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jennifer's voice boomed through the speakers. "Before we begin our auction, there is a matter of corporate integrity we must address. Some people believe they are above the law. Some people use their power to exploit the innocent." She looked directly at Gabriel, a smirk playing on her lips. She pressed a button on the remote in her hand, expecting the doctored audio of our conspiracy to fill the room. Instead, the giant screens behind her flickered to life. It wasn't Gabriel's voice that filled the hall. It was Jennifer's. "Just make sure the offshore accounts are scrubbed. If my father can keep the auditors away for another week, Reed Global will be mine. Gabriel is smart, but he's distracted by that little brat. I'll frame her, destroy him, and we'll take the Icarus patents for ourselves." The recording, a real one, captured by the security bugs Gabriel had placed in his own apartment the moment he suspected. Jennifer echoed through the silent ballroom. The socialites gasped. The SEC commissioner froze, his hand halfway to the envelope in his pocket. Jennifer's face went from pale to ghostly white. She clicked the remote frantically, but the video played on, showing her planting the digital evidence in my apartment. I stepped out from behind a marble pillar, removing my server's jacket to reveal the stunning silk dress beneath. I walked slowly toward the stage, my head held high. Gabriel met me halfway. He didn't look at the screens. He didn't look at the crumbling Kelly empire. He looked at me with a reverence that made my breath hitch. He reached out, taking my hand and pulling it through his arm. "You're late for the party." "Ava," he whispered, loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. "I had to take out the trash," I replied. Judge Kelly tried to reach the exit. But he was met by 4 men in dark suits, actual FBI agents Gabriel had been working with for weeks. The legal ambush had turned into a mass arrest. As the sirens began to wail outside the Metropolitan Hall, Gabriel led me to the center of the dance floor. The music had stopped, the crowd was in shock, but the world felt perfectly still. "They're gone, Ava," Gabriel said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's over." "Not yet," I whispered, looking around at the opulence that had once terrified me. "We still have to build something better than what they destroyed." He leaned down, his forehead resting against mine. "Together." The waitress who had been furniture was gone. The billionaire who had been a machine was gone. In their place stood 2 people who had survived the dark and were finally ready to step into the light. But the climax wasn't just about a victory in a ballroom. It was about the future we were about to write. The aftermath of the Blackthorn Gala was not a quiet affair. It was a scorched earth victory that rewrote the power map of the city. As the sun climbed over the jagged skyline the following morning, the headlines weren't about the charity auction. They were about the fall of a dynasty. Judge Robert Kelly arrested in multi-million-dollar laundering scheme, and socialite Jennifer Kelly linked to corporate espionage plot. I sat in the back of Gabriel's car, watching the world wake up. For the first time in years, the crushing weight in my chest, the math of survival, the fear of the next bill was gone. Gabriel sat beside me, his hand firmly interlaced with mine. He hadn't let go since we left the ballroom. "Where are we going?" I asked, noticing we were heading away from the glass towers of the financial district and toward the cobblestone streets of the old East Side. "To settle a debt," Gabriel said, a mysterious glint in his eyes. The car pulled up in front of a familiar mahogany door with tarnished brass handles. The gilded rose. It looked smaller in the daylight, less like a temple of wealth and more like a relic of a world that had tried to break me. "Gabriel, why are we here?" "Because," he said, stepping out and opening my door, "justice isn't just about punishing the guilty. It's about healing the places where the wounds were made." We walked inside. The restaurant was closed, the chairs stacked on tables. The owner, Mr. Strauss, the man who had watched me be humiliated for years without saying a word, stood in the center of the room, looking gray and defeated. His legal fees from the investigation had drained him, and the scandal had chased away his elite clientele. "Mr. Reed," Strauss stammered, his voice trembling. I didn't expect you. I'm preparing the liquidation papers." "I know," Gabriel said, his voice cold and precise. "And I'm here to buy it. Every brick, every bottle of wine, and every contract." Strauss looked relieved for a split second before Gabriel continued. "But I won't be the owner. I'm purchasing this for Miss Lowe. From this moment on, you report to her. Or rather, you would if you weren't fired. Security will escort you out. You have 10 minutes to clear your desk." As a stunned Strauss was led away, Gabriel turned to me. The silence of the empty restaurant felt heavy with memories. "You're giving me the restaurant?" I whispered, looking at the spot near table 4, where I had once knelt and spilled champagne. "No," Gabriel said, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a sincere, raw tone. "I'm giving you the power to change it. I want this to be the first of many. A place where people aren't treated like furniture. A place that funds something greater." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a leather-bound folder. Inside was a charter for a new organization, the Low Reed Education Foundation. "I've already moved $50 million into the endowment," he said. "It's dedicated to paying full tuitions for students like Leo students, who have the brilliance but not the balance sheet. You're the chairwoman, Ava. You decide who gets a chance. No more invisible geniuses drowning in debt." Tears blurred my vision. This was the modern fairy tale I never thought I'd live. It wasn't about the jewelry or the fancy cars. It was about the fact that the girl who was told she was nothing was now the person making sure no one else ever felt that way. "Gabriel." I started. But he silenced me by taking both of my hands. The morning light streamed through the windows, catching the dust motes in the air, turning the room into a cathedral of gold. Gabriel Reed, the man who had spent his life building fortresses to keep people out, looked at me with a vulnerability that stole my breath. "Ava," he said, his voice thick with an emotion he had spent years hiding. "I spent my life thinking that power was about control, about being the strongest person in the room. But then you tripped in front of my table, and you showed me that real power is the courage to see the truth when everyone else is blind. You saved my company, yes, but you saved me from a life of cold, empty stone." He slowly lowered himself onto one knee. This wasn't a business transaction. This wasn't a calculated move. It was the most honest thing I had ever seen. "I don't want a partner for my empire," he said, holding up a ring, a simple, stunning emerald that matched the color of the hope in my heart. "I want a partner for my life. I want the woman who saw me when I was invisible to the world of real feelings. Ava Lowe, will you marry me?" "Yes," I breathed, the word a promise and a release. 1,000 times, yes. He stood and pulled me into a kiss that tasted like the end of a long winter. We stood there, in the middle of the restaurant where I had once been a shadow. Now 2 halves of a whole, ready to build a world where merit mattered more than money. 1 year later, the Low Reed Education Foundation held its first graduation gala. There were no intellectual slaps, no spies, and no secrets. Leo stood on the stage wearing his medical school robes, his face beaming with a pride that made every shift I ever worked worth it. As the applause echoed, I felt Gabriel's arm slide around my waist. We weren't just the king and queen of the city's tech empire. We were the architects of a new kind of legacy. "Look at them," Gabriel whispered, nodding toward the rows of students whose lives we had changed. "They're not invisible anymore." "No," I said, leaning my head against his shoulder. "They're exactly what they were always meant to be. Seen." The waitress from table 4 was gone, but the woman she became would never forget the view from the bottom. Because when you've been invisible, you know exactly how to make the whole world shine. If this story touched your heart, please don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments with those who believe that destiny can change everything one day. Subscribe, because when destiny shifts, everything changes.